What are some other sites that you visited?
One of the other things I think was interesting was to understand about time.
Yes.
So this is an Aboriginal site. So it's just north of Sydney, called Bulgandry. And Bulgandry is just this area, and there's this rock art. So you can see this little character
Yes.
in the rock art. And this is just an area flat on the ground. And there's just lots. There's whales and kangaroos and other kinds of fish. And there's all kinds of things into the rock. So I go there. And as I say, typically I go and I, sort of tune in and say hello. And, I'm quite experienced at it now. So I don't have to do the full ceremony anymore. So I go and I'm like, and there's nothing. I got nothing. There's nobody. Nobody's there. I'm waiting and nothing. I'm like, well, that's really weird. This is truly never happened that I've gone to a site and there's nothing. Sometimes if you go to a really popular site, it's very hard to access anything. Like Stonehenge, it's very difficult to talk to anybody because it's just there's too much energy. Anyway, so I'm like, well, I don't know. So I look over to the side and there's some grooves in the rock where they show you where they have sharpened stone tools for, hundreds of years. That's the little grinding place and the grooves and the thing. So I look there and there's a man there, a spirit, a guy who's sharpening a tool. And so I greet him and say hello. And he says, hello. And I said, can I ask you about the art over here? And he said, yeah, why? And I said, well, I'm just curious, what these things mean or the significance of them. And he said, that was stuff created by our kids.
Yes. Yeah. I've
So
wondered about, are they really as significant as we place our hope that they are significant when, yes, of course, they'd have children who didn't have paper to draw on the rocks in the sand and things like that.
yeah, so he said, this was a perfect thing to occupy the kids for days and days and days. So he said so the signage at the site tells you that this is a shaman. It's a special shaman, and he's got all these tools. And the guy said to me, no, this is a brother and sister doing a picture of their father. Their father was out hunting, so they drew a picture of their hunter father. And he said, look, some of the art, some of the children were quite, realistic in what they drew. And there's some kangaroos that look very realistic. And then there's some stuff like this. And it was just so refreshing to hear that everything is, as you say, everything is not deeply sacred. That, this is just how they lived. So I was with an elder at the time, and she was curious about the plants. And he said to me, well, look, I don't know enough about the plants. Let me get my wife. So he scampered over to the side of the bush and he came back with another spirit woman. And she said, okay, you want to know about the plants? And so Auntie Barb and she talked about the plants a bit. And then she said to us, how did you come to talk to us? And we said, I'm sorry, I don't understand. And she said, did my son call you? And I looked at Auntie Barb and she looked at me and thought, no, sorry, no. And she said, oh, I thought maybe you came as spirits because we look like spirits to them in their timeline. So she said, well, when spirits come, it's often that he's gone to get them for healing. So we thought you were spirits that came to heal my son. And again, we looked at each other and said, no. And she said, well, can you heal him? And so Auntie Barb, with all of her indigenous experience and knowledge, you just say yes. There's no excuses. You just say, oh, sure, well, I'll do what I can. So we follow the spirit woman across the rocks to an area, and there's the little boy sitting, and he's got very deformed legs. So the legs just never quite grew correctly. And so they're bent and they're not quite, and so he can't walk on them. And so Auntie Barb, I explained to Auntie Barb where his legs are, and she puts her hands and she can feel this. So she can feel where the energy of his legs. And then he says, I can feel, Mom, I can feel her. Auntie Barb's energy. So we had this beautiful thing, and Auntie Barb said to him, he said, I'm feeling strong. And she said to the little boy in spirit, there's lots of ways to feel strong. So it was this beautiful cheers, and it was just a gorgeous little healing. But how bizarre. There we were in our 2021 time frame dimension, doing a healing on a spirit from hundreds of years ago, probably. So then that made me think, well, how does this work? That, what have we altered the timeline? Have we screwed up, have we interfered with the flow of linear time? And the answer we got was, well, no, it's only the eternal now.
Totally.
There is only now.
And
so I thought that.
Doesn't it open up the possibility in terms of, we all know about distance healing, that if healers get together and focus, you don't need to be in the same room. You just send the intention. I mean, Lynn McTaggart's done many intention experiments, which categorically prove that, we can send distance healing and get a result. And now this opens the door to the possibility of sending healing or being the healer in different time-space realities. And what I loved there was the fact that you appeared as spirits to them, and they appeared as spirits to you. So there's bleed-throughs of different realities. It's all different, slight different angular rotational spins. There's so many nows here. But yes, that opens the door to now, and then looking at how do we change our present by healing up the past or healing up situations and issues that people had in the past, and does that change the timeline that they find themselves in the now? I mean, it opens the door to so many beautiful questions, John Paul, doesn't it?
Yes. And the timeline, is there really such a thing? Is that just a construct that made it easy for us? But there is no such thing.
Yes. Well, we all know there's now, and I must say, in recent times, as I look back at what I was taught at school, and I find how irrelevant it is, the teaching paradigm to sit behind a desk, literally learn by rote, and that everything I learned, I cannot see the reflection of where it is now. I mean, I was taught about arable farming in northern Spain, and I can honestly say I've never really had to use that, and I cannot see a use for it. And so it's made me question everything now, to the point where, what can you trust? You're in the present, you're in the now. This is it. That's all you can trust, not what people say your history was or wasn't, because we were taught a history that may or may not be true. And then, I love the looking for meaning in images on walls. And with that image you've got behind you, actually, when you showed it to me, the first thing that came to mind is it looks like a child's photograph, but it also, with the one hand in the circle, looks like somebody's playing table tennis or tennis racket. It didn't look like anything. No. And it wasn't.
No, I think he said that was a bird snare, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those times where I think, okay, it's comfortable for us to think about the timeline, to think about past and future. But what I think we're being called for in this ascension that we're all going to go through is that that's just not going to have there's no purpose to a timeline at all. And I think, well, what happens if I go there to a site and I tune in and I'm catching this slice of now?
Yes.
Much easier for me than to think, well, what do they do when I'm not here? Well, that's an irrelevant question, because it's just a different slice of now. It isn't 5,000, 10,000 years ago, because sometimes the spirits can, if I'm there long enough, we can kind of do a bit of a mind meld. If I'm asking interesting questions about the future stuff. And they often say, I don't know. I can tell you about the time that we were here, but I can't really tell you past that. Because that wasn't part of their lived experience. That wasn't part of their now. I'm like, that's interesting.
Well, I'm going to challenge you to call in spirits from the future at a couple of sites that you'll be going to in the future. Well, if you've got any coming up, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.